What is the craziest encounter of rich kid syndrome that you have experienced? I lived with 5 guys and I was the only one whose parents weren't millionaires. Not close at all. They never cleaned. About once a month I would deep clean the house, but 2 days later there was garbage and food on the floor. I found out they all told their parents the poor kid made all the messes when one of their moms came by to scream at me. My college roommate's mom gave him effing $1,400 for the weekend just randomly. He blew through the whole thing by Saturday, asked his mom for more money and was screaming at her because she promised $1,400 for the weekend, and he spent most of what she gave him on Friday, which isn't a part of the weekend. Knew a trust fund girl whose dad gave her the money to start a company. She lost it when she went on vacation for 6 months and forgot she was supposed to pay her employees all the time. She assumed they would not get paid for 6 months and be there when she got back. I quizzed her on this for a few minutes and it was clear she had no idea what a job was. Girl at work told me she hated her dad. I asked why. She said he keeps asking for money since she used his credit card for a Euro trip and left him an 80 grand bill from last year. First day as a librarian in a private school, help a 7-year-old with the printer. He offers to tip me. My personal favorite was in college. Kid down the hall from me bought a brand new Fender Stratocaster and played with it for a day and got bored and sold it to me case and all for $20. I still have it and play it 15 years later. It's a great guitar. There was this rich kid in our class who was literally disgusted by us buying used stuff, like computer parts, on eBay. Once during conversation I said I bought on eBay memory module for my PC and said to me that I should have a little dignity, and if I buy used stuff I should keep it to myself. What traumatized you so badly it changed your whole way of living? A kid I went to school with was being systematically tortured at home by his sadistic mother. It was kindergarten, but I remember him have marks on his arms. I was just a kid and didn't know they were cigarette burns, so no adult stepped in to help this kid, and one day I guess his mother decided it would be a good idea to put him in the dryer. She killed him and tried to say it was an accident, but thankfully they arrested her and she got life in prison. His name was Anthony. I think about him all the time. Waking up to my second-story apartment on fire. That was 2 years ago and I haven't slept a full night since. Also, my animals always sleep in my room now. When I was in first grade I liked a boy in my class. We were great friends for most of that year. He became sick and passed away before the school year ended. Broke my heart and I really didn't understand it. Then when I was in second grade there was a boy and his sister that I became good friend with. He and his sister were hit by a drunk driver one weekend and they both died. So after losing my best friends in only a couple of years I really became a loner. I've never really made good friendships with anyone since then. So afraid of losing them. I'm now in my 60s and quite happy being by myself. My ex cheating while I was in the house. I could hear, and when I called him out on it, he said, "I didn't think you'd be able to hear." That was 5 years ago. I've been single since, and I don't think I'll ever be in a relationship again. In 5th grade I made a personalized Valentine for my crush, telling her how great and pretty she was, and she angrily confronted me and afterward punched me in the back. Not as traumatic as the other ones here, but it did change the way I approach romantic interests, crushes. What is one piece of advice you wish you had when you were younger? Practice talking to people and being with people. Social skills can be learned like any other skill. It just takes patience and practice. Success greets you in private and failure slaps you in public. Don't spend so much time thinking about what other people think of you. They care more about themselves than you. Spend more time discovering yourself and loving, accepting who you are instead of wasting time doing things to get their approval. That, and when you thought that, whatever drama, comment, snarky remark, etc. was about you, it wasn't really about you. It was about them. I wish I'd known earlier that I would be happier if I stopped needlessly judging people. Being an adult is about running into problems and in one way or another overcoming all of them. No putting off or discarding the ones you don't like. They're your problems and you have to deal with and resolve them. Value the people in your life, don't take them for granted. What's the dumbest thing someone has ever said to you? That we don't need farmers because we have grocery stores. I live in a rural area. A friend of mine asked me why we didn't see stars when we flew over them. She truly believed that when you were flying on an airplane, you flew over the stars. I was speechless. When I was in high school I rode the bus to school, and a girl who lived down the street from me walked up one morning and said, "When I was putting on my deodorant I thought it smelled good so I ate some of it." I asked how much. She said, "I took a bite and didn't like it, but wasn't sure so I tried it again." That was 14 years ago and I still think about it. Someone once said that they couldn't wait for Halloween to fall on Friday the 13th. Someone told me I'm a Scientologist because I believe in science. A guy asked me if Hitler was before or after Second World War. We are both native Germans. Not me, but a friend of mine traveled to the US with her family when she was younger. Upon hearing her family's accent, an American asked, "Where are you guys from?" The answer was Australia, and that person confidently responded with, "Ah, which state is that?" My husband's mom is very ignorant and known to say really stupid things. Most recently we were in Italy and she asked why they don't just tear down the Colosseum because it looked so old. I had an acquaintance claim that the earth must be flat because nobody's talking about the white landmass around the map and how it's a cover-up. He was pointing at the white rectangular border of the paper. Last month a coworker asked if I'll run out of blood eventually because don't eat very couple months. He's 34 years old. My grandma's friend and her daughter said they could hear the International Space Station fly overhead. It sounds like, whoosh, lol. Did your feeling about something is very wrong here turned out to be true? My dad was 6. Dad heard a clap of thunder and immediately told the babysitter to call someone because my dad's been struck by lightning. My grandfather had in fact been struck directly by lightning while playing golf with my grandmother. The electricity entered his shoulder and out his ankle. My grandmother resuscitated my grandfather and he lived to be over 90. My brother and dad lived in a different state, and my brother was in the hospital recovering from an accident. My first weird feeling was when I was booking the flight to see him and I was considering cancellation insurance. What if something happens to my dad and I have to fly out sooner? I shrugged it off. My dad was doing fine. 2 weeks later, my brother tells me that my dad was visiting and went home early because he had evidently caught something and wasn't feeling well. I got a really bad feeling and called him. It went to voicemail. He did say he was going to bed early and it was about bedtime for him. I said I heard he wasn't feeling well and wanted to check in, and that I really loved him. I felt weird, but my dad would have been royally pissed if I called 911 to his house because he was under the weather and decided to sleep it off. I decided to wait until the morning. Morning comes, nothing. My brother sent his friend over, no answer. Friend goes in the house. My dad had passed away. I wish I had called. It just didn't seem that serious and I have a penchant for overreacting. The last thing he told my brother was, "I'll be fine, I'm just going to bed." The thing that got me was the voicemail. I looked through his messages. Mine was read. If nothing else, I know he listened to that voicemail. One of the last things he heard was me telling him I loved him. It's a childhood memory that almost all of us have. The balloon game where it can't touch the floor. How the school seemed a different world when you stayed late or had to be there on a weekend. Finding a really cool stick and imagining it as any object we wanted. Sword, lightsaber, wand, laser gun, etc. Having a wiggly tooth. Staring at the school clock. Being gifted a small amount of money and thinking you were rich. Either trying to step on no cracks or on only cracks on the sidewalk. Climbing up the stairs like a dog. Trying to see how the refrigerator light turns off. People no longer bound by their non-disclosure agreements. What can you now disclose? Funny story, moments after I was unceremoniously fired because my tech skills were found to be insufficient, the bosses who fired me demanded to know the whereabouts of a hugely important computer file I had worked on. I refused to help them. I even cited the exact language of the NDA I was compelled to sign. I am prohibited from disclosing details of my employment with anyone, including past and current employees of the company. I expounded, adding, "So ask someone who works here, because I don't." It was a great FU moment that I still cherish 5 years later, but now I think I can disclose the truth. I only hid behind the NDA language because I had no clue where to find their damn computer file or even where to look. I suck with computers. The cupcake shop I used to work for claimed everything was homemade but used Pillsbury cake mix as a base. I worked at a gym, and in the showers there was yellow shampoo and blue body wash and pump dispensers. I found out that the only difference between the two soaps was the color. The book you're reading might only be a bestseller because the author had enough money to buy thousands and thousands of copies, have them shipped to a warehouse for storage, and eventually destroyed. The higher-ups in a company I worked for several years ago had a nonverbal agreement among managers to not hire black people. It was in an area with very low African American population, but the fact that the VP slipped that to me on a night out with coworkers was surprising. People wouldn't believe how old-fashioned IT systems are behind big online shops etc. Like anyone with decent IT skills would be able to crack them. Some of them are 30 years old command liners that are only in place because everything got built around them and have never been replaced. Your security guards of Reddit. What was the most effed up thing you've ever saw on your shift? I've worked security for the past 30 years, from working on the doors for clubs to hotel security, but nothing quite stuck with me like this did. It was my second security job. I was working at a big hotel in London. I had the graveyard shift, so it was usually super calm. Most shifts I was paid to watch movies and scroll through my phone. This one night however was very different. About an hour into my shift I got a call from reception to say there was an extremely distressed man telling them he was about to be killed and a gang was after him. He spoke very limited English, so reception was struggling to fully understand the issue. I checked the cameras and could see the man reaching over the desk trying to grab for the phone, so I rushed down from my office. When I got down I took the man into a side room and tried to get him to explain the situation. He begged me to call the police, saying a gang had been following him and they were going to chop him into pieces and kill him. He was extremely scared. I left him in the room and phoned the police. They arrived and talked to the man, and supposedly sorted out the issue. They checked him into a room at the hotel and said they would be back in the morning to interview and discover what has happened. I took the man up to his room and left him there. The man stayed in his room all night and no one bothered him. It was about 30 minutes before my shift finished, so I thought I would go knock on his room to make sure he was okay before I left. I got to his room and knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked again hard and shouted security. No answer. I was worried for his safety, so unlocked the door and shouted in. Still no answer. I entered the room. It was completely empty. Then suddenly I get a call from reception. The girl was crying her eyes out, shouting for me to get down immediately. I ran down the stairs as quick as I could. When I got to the bottom I could see the man stood in the middle of the hotel lobby carrying a fire extinguisher covered in blood. He was also covered in blood but looked to have no injuries. There was a trail of blood splats leading from him to the first lift. I immediately radioed into the police as an emergency. I kept my distance but shouted at the man to explain what had happened. He told me they had come for him and he had to defend himself. The police soon arrived. As soon as they did, the man surrendered himself and he was handcuffed and put into a police van. It was now safe for me to cross over the lobby, so I went and had a look inside the lift. Inside were two men, their faces so damaged they barely looked human. The lift was covered in blood, as if it had been painted red. It was an awful sight. He had hit them so hard with the extinguisher he had caved their faces in. The worst part, the two men had nothing to do with any gangs. They were regulars at the hotel, who Al got to know quite well. They both had kids and families. They were staying over this night to visit a famous art gallery. I never found out what happened to the man who killed them.